Hi, my name is Georgi Popov, and I'm the current chair of the Occupational Risk and Safety Sciences Department at the University of Central Missouri. I have more than 29 years of experience in environmental health and safety profession. I started my career as a chemical officer, but then I worked for an environmental company, and now I'm a full professor at the University of Central Missouri. I would like to show you a very interesting risk assessment case study where we can demonstrate the benefits of risk assessment. So with this case study, we would like to demonstrate how an exhaust pipe manufacturer wanted to add welding stations, and they also had concerns from occupational health and safety perspective. Unfortunately, they haven't done design safety reviews previously, since it was an established operation, and it's a large manufacturer of really important exhaust pipes for large vehicles. The welding stations were not perfectly designed, as you can see, and the company had experienced some losses in addition to hexavalent chromium exposure. Years ago, we didn't have a hexavalent chromium standard. Therefore, they were not so concerned with the exposure to the welders. However, since 2006, we have a new standard for hexavalent chromium exposure, and now the company not only had to comply with the new standard, but they also wanted to reduce the risk for their exposure, and they want to reduce the risk from operational perspective as well, not to mention the financial risks and the strategic risks. Take a look at the welding station's design. I'm pretty sure all of you can understand why the company had concerns from ergonomics perspective and from industrial hygiene type hexavalent chromium exposure, in addition to other harmful elements in the welding fumes. Now, we took some samples and we found out that most of the welders were overexposed based on the new standard. Therefore, the company had to do something about that. And as you can see, 3 of the welders exceeded the permissible exposure limits, and all of them exceeded the action limit for hexavalent chromium. So as you can see here, the engineers suggested adjustable workstations. They also suggested local exhaust ventilation, and they also suggested welders' rotation and personal protective equipment. However, looking at that from a risk perspective, think about that for a moment. Is that good enough, or we can add additional layers of controls? In addition to all that, you can see how the welding stations kind of disperse the welding fumes throughout the whole facility. So the team actually suggested design safety reviews, and of course, occupational safety and health management convinced the management to actually perform that design safety review based on previous losses, based on exposures, and based on concerns. Then, of course, that had effect on productivity, quality, and financial results for the company. Now, if you look at the benefits of designing in safety, there are plenty of benefits for us, and we have to communicate that properly. So our OSH team participated in the design process. We had to establish the design team. We also had to consider the new prevention through design standard as a guide. And we also wanted to establish the safety minimums for that design. We also have to perform the review as a team, of course. So if you look at the no statements here, that is a very interesting concept, very well established in our profession. So look at the no statements that we can absolutely convince the engineers and designers that we have an opportunity to improve the design process. So, for instance, no portable ladders, no respirators used, no lifting of heavy equipment. So, as you can tell, the exhaust pipes of large vehicles are heavy. So, developing such no statements will give us an opportunity to influence engineers and designers early in the design and redesign phase. And if they tell you that's not possible, we have never done it that way, we may have to use more convincing arguments. And imagine that telling them that you can find other consultants, it's actually a very convincing argument. So believe it or not, within 2.5 days, they had a new design. So here's an example how that design safety review may look like. And we started with what if analysis. You start asking very simple what if questions. So what if the welders are exposed to hexavalent chromium? And the answer here could be they can develop lung cancer, they can develop many other occupational diseases, and as you can see here, it's not a pretty picture. However, if you want to convince the management, sometimes they can tell you, well, that's the cost of doing business for us, and we understand it's a high risk from occupational safety and health perspective, but it is an opportunity from operational and financial perspective. Now, if you ask a different question, what if question, so what if half of our most experienced welders are not capable of working due to occupational exposures and overexposures? Well, now that becomes a whole different question for the management, and that gives them a whole different risk perspective. More likely, they're going to tell us that that is not an acceptable risk from operational and financial and strategic perspective. Therefore, we have an opportunity to convince the upper level managers that reducing occupational health and safety risks may lead to operational efficiency and reduced operational risks and reduced financial and strategic risks. So looking at the ALARP concept here, it's an amazing visual developed by Bruce Lyon. We have to start with avoidance. Well, in this case, it's an already existing corporation. Therefore, we have an opportunity to actually eliminate some of the risks, especially the welder's exposure to hexavalent chromium. So that would be our priority. And if we cannot eliminate it, then we can go to substitution, minimization, simplification, or engineering controls. Well, one of the suggestions was we can start with easy fixes like personal protective equipment. Well, that is all good. However, that reduces the efficiency from operational perspective. So apparently the plant manager would not approve using of personal protective equipment due to reduction of operational efficiencies. The other option was to capture the fumes with local exhaust ventilation. And the organization tried that for a couple of years, and the only problem was the welders did not like that option because the moment you extract the fumes from the welding area, that reduces the quality of the weld. And of course, that leads to other operational risks. We have an opportunity here to completely eliminate the risk for welders' exposure to hexavalent chromium, in addition to lifting heavy exhaust pipes. So we have to follow the risk treatment opportunities here, and obviously that risk was not acceptable, not only from health and safety perspective, but from operational and financial and strategic perspective. So if we look at the hierarchy of risk treatments here, we had an opportunity to suggest complete elimination of hexavalent chromium exposure and lifting of heavy exhaust pipes. So let's take a look at it, how that process may look like. If we completely automate the process, you will notice that there is no welder in the area, there is no hexavalent chromium exposure for the welder, there is no heavy lifting, as you can see here, and we were able to actually eliminate, with the no statements, we were able to eliminate hexavalent chromium exposure to the welders and lifting of heavy exhaust pipes. Now, we also have other opportunities. You may have noticed that the pollution prevention equipment that captures the hexavalent chromium fumes was located way up 10 feet elevation. Therefore, that would not be acceptable risk from an operational perspective, because we have to stop the whole operation to replace that filter, but that also creates safety risks. So we have opportunities to suggest to the design team to bring everything down to floor level, so we can actually replace the filters easily and efficiently without stopping the whole operation and creating a whole welding area that is not accessible for the welders and other operators, and it's completely automated. So the only time we have to stop the process is when we have to replace the filters every 6 months or so. And that creates opportunities for us to demonstrate how risk reduction will bring operational efficiency, and how we can demonstrate the financial risk reduction as well. Now, as you can see here, that prevention through design solution had very favorable financial outcomes. The net present value was positive, it had very favorable return on investment, and the payback period was amazing as well. So we're going to discuss some of these issues in our risk-based courses, and it's really important for us to understand the importance, how we can bring the benefits from occupational health and safety perspective to the operational risk reduction and financial benefits as well, and as well as strategic.